Welcome to Muslim Apologetics Australia. So recently I just watched the documentary called Inside a Terror Plot by 60 Minutes Australia. So I want to give my Muslim response review of this actual documentary. So when watching the documentary, it was really interesting that the commentators in this, the ones who are producing this documentary, it's like they were salivating from their mouth. Like salivating, like you could see the glow in their face when they're documenting this story, because the amount of times they used the word terror in this documentary was, I probably could have counted at least 900 times. The reason why I say this, you may be saying, Mustafa, why are you saying that, they're so happy to mention this word terrorism? They are. They're so happy to connect terrorism with Islam. Like the amount of times in this documentary they use the word terror or terrorist attack or terror, these terrorists, these masterminds, these terrorists, the amount of times they use the word terror, and here's the thing, would they have used the same language if a white person did the same crime? If a white person did the same crime, they're not going to use the word terror. I will guarantee you 110% that if a white person tried to put a bomb on a plane, you know what they're going to say? They're going to say, it's just a hate crime. It was just hate. He had so much hate growing up. He had hate because generally when you use the word hate, he's innocent. He's innocent because, he was outraged. He boiled up. He came to a point in his life where he just wanted to express his hate because, he was so oppressed. They'd use the word hate. So this is what I say. They were literally salivating each time they used the word terrorism in their documentary. And you need to understand one thing. We are so privileged and we are so lucky that we live in a time where social media is beyond television. Growing up in Australia, when I was growing up in Australia, and I was born here, growing up in Australia, all we were shown on mainstream TV was their point of view, right? We weren't shown anything other than Western media. So all we got growing up as children, as youths, as teenagers, as adults, was just a one-sided story. So whenever an attack would happen in the world, we'd only see one side of propaganda. But what YouTube and all these other social media networks done, whether it's, a random person can just grab his phone, upload anything on social media now, and we get to see the second side of the story. So Australian media, which is run by the Zionist lobby, they have failed so badly by introducing other media networks like Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, because now anyone can upload the other side of the story. And so if you are a Muslim organization, you couldn't put your side of the story on Australian television, right? So if Australian television came out and made a documentary against Islam, you couldn't actually put your side of the story on. You couldn't put the other side of the story on, right? But now look what I'm doing now. I've got a video now. I'm putting my review and I'm putting it on social media for other people to watch. Yes, it's not going to have big numbers, but it's still something that we can put out there. And there are other Islamic organizations like One Path Network that has good numbers. They got millions of followers. And so it is more effective. This is why they're challenged more now. And this is why they're losing the propaganda war. Like you have a look at what happened with Israel. It is the most documented genocide where now there's an arrest warrant for Benjamin Netanyahu and Gallant. Now, I want to ask you this question. Would a arrest warrant been issued if we didn't have social media? Remember, Israel blocked a lot of the Western media, a lot of the Islamic media. They blocked all of that media when they were committing genocides in Gaza. They were blocking all this media. But despite blocking it, a lot of the IDF soldiers were publishing their war crimes on social media. You had individuals who still had access on their phone who would document these crimes and publish it on TikTok and so forth. So what happened was, remember how Israel even blocked the internet? And then we had Elon Musk say, no, you're not going to block the internet. And Elon Musk opened up the internet. And so what happened was, this is when Israel copped it. You know, so much of this stuff got released into the social media. Then you know what Israel did? Israel went and contacted Elon Musk. They invited Elon Musk to Israel, remember? They made him visit the October 7 massacre. And then they changed his mind. And then what happened? But at this time it was too late. Most of this information was already put on social media. So they were trying to brainwash Elon Musk to get him back on the Israeli side, right? Why do you think Israel used Elon Musk? Right? They got under his skin. And who knows, they probably provided him certain media. They probably provided him certain access. Who knows what happens behind the closed doors, right? So, getting back on point, 60 Minutes, a lot of these networks, Sky News, 60 Minutes, the Daily Telegraph, the Australian, Sky News, Fox, all these networks, don't forget, they've all got separate names, but they all are run by the Jewish Zionist lobby groups. They've got a strong Zionist backing. And this is why all of them are pro-Israel. And we know that they're all pro-Israel. Remember when the Zionist Jew went to America and he shot two people in a vehicle, and these two people who were in the vehicle, he mistaken them for Palestinians, right? He thought he was going to shoot and kill two Palestinians. They ended up being two Jews. And so Sky News and the Daily Telegraph, all these media networks, they didn't label it terrorism. They said it was a hate crime, right? And they delayed publishing anything about this up until the third day. They refused to publish anything on their Facebook accounts. And so you can see, so when a non-Muslim commits an act of terror, they muzzle it. They put a muzzle on it. And so this is their desperate games. This is how desperate they are. This is how insecure they are, because they know how fast Islam is growing. And in order to move anyone away from Islam, in order, just so people don't start reading the Quran and start questioning their own worldviews and converting to Islam, they try and bring up this Islam is hate, Islam is terrorism, Islam is all about murdering people in the West. And so this is what is being amplified in the media. And so this works against them, right? It works against them where there's social media now against them. And that's why, there's an arrest warrant for Benjamin Netanyahu and so forth. And you've got to ask yourself, would an arrest warrant had it been issued if there wasn't access to social media where all of these genocides were committed? So this is why they are losing the battle. The West is completely now losing the battle. So this is why they have to come up even harder to condemn Muslims who commit terrorism and amplify it as much as they can because they're feeling insecure. They're losing the battle. They know by 2050 that Islam is going to be the most dominant religion in the world because the woke has taken over the West. Many of the Christians have lost all of their worshippers to the woke and LGBTI and feminism and LGBTI and secularism and atheism. You know, they did a census in Australia. Now 50% of the population do not identify themselves with a religious affiliation. So they're losing. They're losing the battle not only to Islam, they're losing the battle to atheism, they're losing the battle to wokeism. So they're losing their Christian identity. They're losing their Christian faith. And their last step now is how do we bring down Islam? How do we bring down Islam like we did with Christianity? So it's a satanic cult. They are a satanic cult. They are evil, and they're trying to westernize all of the Muslim countries. It's interesting because if you have a look at the documentary, they say that, for instance, ISIS, they're like, oh, ISIS did an attack against our Western democracy. They always like to bring this up, right? ISIS terrorists, they wanted to attack Western democracy. This is why they wanted to plant a bomb. They wanted to plant a bomb on the plane. And by the way, it was a great foil. You know, these terrorists, and which they are, ISIS is a terrorist group, they tried to put a bomb on the plane and it got foiled. And it worked against them. Alhamdulillah, this is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? They'll never give credit to Allah here. Instead, they'll say, Allah failed a terrorist attack. But I'll say, no, Allah didn't fail the terrorist attack. Allah plotted against them. And they weren't successful. Their dua wasn't successful because you know why? They were trying to kill women and children. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, what did he say? The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said, do not kill the women and the children. But what does the Western narrative say? Western narrative says you can kill women and children. They call it collateral damage. So Western values is more terroristic. Israeli method is more terroristic because Israel believes that you can kill women and children. They don't say it openly, but this is part of their this is part of their belief in Judaism. 1 Samuel 15:3, Malachi. This is what Benjamin Netanyahu quoted when he quoted Malachi. He was talking about 1 Samuel 15:3, where the instruction from God, from their version of God, was to kill women and children. In 1 Samuel 15:3, all of you Christians, all of you Westerners, open it up. Biblical statement, 1 Samuel 15:3, go out and kill men, women, and children, and even infant babies, even animals. Don't spare them, kill them all. So this is what they did in Gaza. Kill all. Kill all of them. Doesn't matter how many Hamas soldiers you believe are in that building. Blow that whole 12-story building. Kill them all. Bury them all. That's fine. That's fine. And then they blame Hamas. They do the atrocity. They do the killing. They instigate murdering and killing women and children. And then they say, oh, well, it's Hamas's fault. It's Hamas. Imagine ISIS says something like that. Imagine ISIS says, we blow the whole plane up. We put a bomb on the plane. We blow the whole plane up. But you know what? Don't blame us. Don't blame ISIS. Don't blame ISIS. Blame the West. Blame the West for sending bombs to Syria. Blame the West for sending bombs to Iraq. Blame them. Same thing, right? Exactly same thing. But ISIS is a terror. The West is not a terror state. And then they say it was an attack. So, yeah, we've condemned ISIS. We've said why what they did is wrong. And this is proof. And the interesting thing is they actually tried to plan and put a bomb on Etihad. And this plane is traveling to Lebanon. So who is most of the people on this plane? It's going to be Muslims. So ISIS is killing Muslims. They don't care. So they have a very extreme version. So this is not even in Islam. This isn't even an extreme version of it. This isn't Islam, right? But of course, they don't mention that on the 60 Minutes program. That's not mentioned. The hadith not to kill women and children is not mentioned. And in the end of the video, you know what? They put an ISIS member. Who knows, maybe this member made some points, but the only points that they actually publish on the 60-minute show is Islam is going to win in the end. Right? So notice, in the whole documentary, Islamic terrorism, ISIS terrorism, they wanted to kill us because we believe in Western democracy. And in the end, Islam is going to win. Right? So you got to understand, this is all been pre-programmed for you to think that Islam is only about terrorism, Islam is only about killing. And the interesting thing is, what they don't mention is, notice when these terrorist attacks are happening. Again, I'm not justifying terrorism, but I'm showing you the connection and the link. Remember, it's interesting because I spent time here condemning ISIS, but as soon as you talk about the elephant in the room, oh, you're justifying terrorism, right? Because they want to silence any criticism against the West. Notice, why aren't these ISIS members targeting a Scottish plane? Why aren't they targeting a South American plane? Why aren't they targeting, somewhere in maybe like an islander country, maybe like Tonga Airlines or something, or New Zealand? They won't target these airplanes. They're targeting specific airplanes. Specific airplanes that belong in the West. West Australia. Their target is Australia, Americas, because these countries are sending bombs, indiscriminate bombs, to those lands. Whether it be Syria, whether it be Iraq, whether it be, those countries, because they don't want an Islamic Sharia to control Syria or Iraq and so forth. So it's interesting for them to say, oh, they're attacking us because they don't like our Western, they're threatened by Western democracy, when it's the West that is threatened by the growth of Islam, that Islamic countries are becoming more conservative, they're coming back to Sharia law. You're threatened by that and you're going to bomb that, right? Because one could argue you're afraid of the truth. You're afraid that when Muslims unite under Sharia, that they're going to be a much stronger nation. You're insecure about that. You're insecure about the truth of Islam. So you're sending bombs to destroy those nations so they don't come back to conservative Islam. So then one could say, you're so insecure about Islam, about the truth of Islam, that it's growing, that people are converting to Islam, that now you're trying to portray it as a terrorist religion. And we know how insecure 60 Minutes and all of these shows are, is because they won't have a documentary on Brendan Tarrant, who went in and shot 50 Muslim worshippers at a mosque in New Zealand. They won't do a documentary on, by the way, they write newspaper articles. They talk about how Brendan Tarrant had he was an angelic child. He was so innocent growing up. This is how they actually portrayed him. Right, so they won't do a documentary on the Jewish Zionist who went and tried to kill two people in Miami, mistaking them for a Palestinian. So they won't do a documentary on that. Of course not. And of course, what they don't mention in the documentary, they had intelligent agents talking about who's a terrorist expert. Working for intelligence, he's talking about how, how it will never go away. Terrorism will never go away. You can beat it in one way, but you will always plan in other ways and so forth. But what they didn't question is that, yes, terrorism will go away. It will. They actually know the answer to this. right? Terrorism will go away if you stop bombing those Muslim nations. We know that the spike of terrorism went through the roof after September 11, after the Bush administration started bombing Iraq. Terrorism level was out of the world. Then when they stopped bombing Afghanistan and the American troops withdrew, terrorism was almost unheard of, right? You might have one or two here and there, when it was literally a regular basis every week. And then now that Syria has completely been restored, you don't hear terrorism. Like, you'll hardly hear terrorism, right? Hardly you'll hear terrorism. And then terrorism went a little bit back up when Israel was starting to attack Gaza. So you notice you always see this connection between foreign intervention and terrorism. And so long as foreign intervention continues, you'll always have an extreme version who breeds itself and out of frustration attacking the West. And this is really sad, because me living in Australia, it's very sad for me as well, because I could have been on that plane. I could have boarded that Etihad plane, maybe traveling to the Middle East or to Lebanon or to Turkey or wherever, and then I could have been a victim of that. I could have been what the West is, what Australia coalition with America, how they're bombing. It's threatening all our lives. Because these people like, Islam threatens all our lives. No, it's the West that is threatening all our lives. If the West stops bombing the Middle East, then we will all be at peace. I wouldn't have to be afraid of boarding the plane. I wouldn't have to be afraid of commuting public transport, right? And so the West has got a lot of blood on its hands. The West has got lots of blood on its hands. And the more it fights Islam, the more it threatens all our lives here. It was also interesting because in the show, they were saying how one of the brothers who was coerced to plant a bomb on the plane, he had absolutely no idea that there was a bomb in his luggage, and he was taking it through I guess it was Sydney Airport or Melbourne Airport, I can't remember which one it was in the documentary. And as they're going through the airport, anyway, they're basically sympathizing with the brother. They're saying, how did your brother do this against you? It was because you're on a different mentality from them. You didn't believe in their worldview. You believed in more of the Western values. They were trying to sort of frame that. And I thought that was really, really cringy, because they're basically saying, oh, you're lucky you weren't religious. You weren't the religious one. You were more of the brother who was the black sheep. He was the non-religious one, right? And I thought, well, shame on 60 Minutes, because I'm religious myself. I've never thought about doing a terrorist attack. I've never ever thought in my mind, I never even crossed my mind to even become radicalized in that sense. And I'm a very conservative religious person, and there are millions of Muslims like me. Trust me, if millions of religious people, if you had to be a terrorist because you were religious, right, then there are millions of religious people would all kill you, right? There'd be no Westerners left, right? But that is not the truth. That is not the truth. If you have a look at even Al-Qaeda and ISIS's recruitment program, the recruitment program is between age of 18 to 25. This is majority of their recruitment age. And you have a look and you may say, well, they're religious, but they're very naive. They've probably come to the religion. They're probably very enthusiastic about it, but it's very easy to brainwash 18 to 25-year-olds, right? Easier to brainwash them. But that wasn't mentioned in the 60-minute program. That wasn't mentioned, which is interesting. And they won't mention that. They won't mention that because they know that the more religiously mature you are, the more you understand your religion, that it's not connected with terrorism. All right? But if you are a terrorist recruiter and you have an extreme version of the Quran verses and you literally take them out of context, then it's easier to manipulate a young person. So one verse that they like manipulating and taking out of context is that blood for a blood or an eye for an eye, so things like that. And so what they would say is that if the Westerner kills our women and children, then we are allowed to kill their women and children. But this verse has completely been butchered out of context because there is a hadith that says, do not kill the women and the children. And whoever kills one innocent life, it is like you've killed all of humanity. This is in the Quran. So the terrorist mindset, the radicals, they ignore this context because they've become extreme. But it's easier to convince the youth who are more emotionally charged. And so it is easier to convince them to join a terrorist group and to commit acts of terrorism. But of course, they won't mention that in the 60 Minutes show. And I want to end this with this. If these people really, really cared about human rights and they really oppose terrorism, 60 Minutes, how come they haven't made a documentary saying how the International Criminal Court has issued an arrest warrant for Benjamin Netanyahu, and Benjamin Netanyahu is running away from being tried in this International Criminal Court that is backed by 123 countries, with a lot of European countries, including Italy, including England, including Germany. A lot of these countries are part of it, but there is no documentary from 60 Minutes putting a documentary out there with all the genocide committed by Israel in Gaza. There's no documentary about that. And now you need to ask yourself, is 60 Minutes a supporter of crimes? Are they a supporter of a genocide? Are they a supporter of Israeli genocide? You got to ask yourself that question. Of course they are, dude. They want to kill every Muslim. They want every Muslim, children dead in Gaza. This is it. Their war is plainly and obviously against Islam and Muslims. They would want every single Muslim dead. You can see it in their face, dude. Like, you can see it in every line of their face. You'll see it. They want every single Muslim dead. I will guarantee you this woman, for instance, here, she worships Israel. She worships 100% Israel. She wants every Muslim genocided and killed. And this is why, folks, Western media will never make a documentary on Benjamin Netanyahu running away from the ICC, International Criminal Court. Now, you may disagree with the ICC International Criminal Court, but the interesting thing is the ICC International Criminal Court also put an arrest warrant for Benjamin Netanyahu, which you don't have a problem with. And then suddenly ICC becomes credible. And the ICC is backed by 123 nations. And a lot of these Zionist supporters say, we don't need the International Criminal Court. If anything, if there was a real charge, then the Israeli government itself would send Benjamin Netanyahu to court, blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean? It's got a strong judicial system where it can prosecute its own. That's a lot of bullshit, because up until now it hasn't prosecuted one single leader for war crimes. And at the same time, if if Israel believes it does have a strong case, why doesn't it just challenge the ICC and turn up to court? Why? If it has such a strong initiative to prove its innocence, you'd think that it'd turn up to court, but it doesn't. It's running away. If any other leader was running away, if a Muslim leader was running away, you'd say, look, that's proof they're guilty. That's proof they're guilty. They're running away from the ICC. Colonel Gaddafi, if he was alive, he's running, he's boycotting the ICC. See, it's proof Colonel Gaddafi, he's running away. Or the ISIS leader, or the Osama bin Laden. Osama bin Laden, he's boycotted the ICC, right? That's proof that he's guilty, right? But when it comes to Netanyahu, no, of course not. Double standards. So yeah, don't believe these people, folks, when they stick up for human rights. They don't stick up for human rights. They would want every single Muslim in Gaza to be killed, because these people even believe you're a terrorist when you're a baby. They I swear to God, they are so messed up. They're such maniacs that they actually believe that when a child is born in Gaza, that's it, he's worthy of death because he's just going to grow up to be a terrorist. This is how sick these people are in their head. Imagine ISIS said the same thing. Imagine ISIS said, we're going to kill every single baby and child in the West because they're just going to grow up. They're going to grow up to hate Islam. They're going to grow up to hate Islam, so they're worthy of death. Imagine they said something like this, right? Imagine the reaction. So that's it, folks. That's it. Thank you. Please subscribe and share.